been going on about this Slack for 1 hour now. All right, good evening. The TED Talk is a strange beast, and I say that personally, because as a facilitator, my first instinct is to speak for no more than 2 minutes at a stretch. My talk, incidentally, today is about the gifts of entrepreneurship. Speakers before me, speakers that come after me, speakers on TED, are far more qualified to speak about entrepreneurship in general, what entrepreneurs should do, shouldn't do, how to build billion-dollar companies, how to raise funds, how to have social impact, what have you. My scope is decidedly more limited. In that, I am curious and really looking forward to be able to share with us things that entrepreneurship taught me that I've been able to, at a personal level, apply on a moment-to-moment basis, on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis. And truly, it's been a gift that keeps giving, right? So there's 5 things that I'm going to be sharing with you, 5 gifts, as I call them. And the choice of phrase there, gifts, is a curious phrase, because when you look at the phraseology, or when you look at what these gifts are, they may not appear as gifts to begin with. And yet, make no mistake, they are gifts for all intents and purposes. So, shall we get started? All right, thank you. So the first gift that entrepreneurship gave me, and these are in no order. So the first gift that entrepreneurship offered me was the gift of imperfection, right? By which I mean, as an entrepreneur, perfection is always a moving target, right? You are always shipping out imperfect products. Perfection is in some ways something that you sometimes even cannot afford, because there is competition, there are timelines, there's all kinds of things. And beyond entrepreneurship, what not wanting to go after or chase perfectionism has meant is that in every single area of life, I've been able to see that there is no one way of doing anything, right? So for instance, when you are able to see that there's no one way to build a product, or when there's no one way to offer a service, you're also able to see that there's no one way of making pasta. There's no one way of dancing. There's no one way of giving a TED Talk. There's no one way of choosing a career. There's no one way of choosing a life partner. Okay? And when you're able to see this, you know what happens? Anyone? When you're able to see that there's no one way of doing anything, what happens?
It opens doors.
It opens doors, and you are no longer desperate. Because you're able to see that there are 1,000 ways that all lead to heaven. Alright? And the way this is game-changing for me is because when I grew up, I was constantly told there's only one way to get what you want. There's only one way to become successful. There's only one way to build a relationship. There's only one way to do stuff. Alright? So perfectionism or perfection is a very narrow-minded view of excellence. Right? And that's the difference between, so So when I say the gift of imperfection, the principal gift of imperfection is that it brought home to me the difference between perfectionism and excellence. Excellence is where you find your way of expression, where you find your way of dancing, where you find your way of cooking the pasta, and then you go all the way with it. Whereas perfectionism is becoming almost a slave to a preconceived idea of doing something, right? So that's the gift of imperfection. The second of the gifts is the gift of impermanence, uncertainty, illusion of control, transience, right? And these are the three phrases that are very, very, very close to my heart, for reasons you'll soon find out. And so, illusion of control. To give you an example, if you go to people who are unlettered, who have not gone to school, when you speak to them, they will say, "पहले मैं पैदा हुआ, फिर मैं स्कूल गया, फिर कॉलेज गया, फिर नौकरी लग गई, फिर बच्चे हो गए." Right? Roughly translates into, I was born, I went to school, I went to college, I got married, and I have 2 kids. But if you go to people who are educated, who are lettered, they would say, I went to school, I went to college, I decided to get married, and I decided to have kids. Alright? You see the difference in the two? What's the difference? In the latter, there's an illusion of control. There's an illusion of being able to decide what's going to happen. Alright, I can tell you this, every living moment, no matter where you are, no matter who you are with, no matter what you're planning to do, every living moment there are a billion possibilities that can come to be. Like, so for instance, in this moment, for this conversation to happen, all parts of the jigsaw puzzle need to come into place. Is that right? We need to have electricity, right? There shouldn't be an earthquake right now happening. Plus. And for this moment not to happen, only one thing needs to be out of place. Is that right? Yes? And therefore, one of the first things, if you try your hand at entrepreneurship at the most basic level, let's say for instance, if outside of this auditorium you try and sell homemade lemonade, within 10 minutes, one of the first things you'd understand that there's no such thing as control, right? You are constantly responding to what is happening. So one of the gifts that entrepreneurship gave me was being able to see that there's no such thing as control. Uncertainty is what you're able to appreciate when you see that there is no way that you can possibly imagine the odds of something that may or may not happen. So in other words, in the world that we live in, there's a lot of talk of risk. Did you hear the word risk a lot?
Yes.
Yes? Yeah? So you would hear, so for instance, doing something is risky, doing a business is risky, climbing a mountain is risky, eating a food that's 3 days old is risky, etc. And my fundamental point is that the world is not so much risky as it is uncertain. And I'll quickly tell you the difference between the two. Risk is what you have in a casino in Las Vegas, where you have what are known as odds. Okay, so for example, risk is where past behavior can be learned to model present actions and predict future results. Alright? It happens in casinos, it happens in situations where there is climate control. In real life, there is no such thing as risk. There is such a thing as uncertainty. Right? So, for instance, we've been on human civilization, modern human civilization has been on for 6,000 years. 2 years back, do you think there were any odds of a pandemic happening?
No.
There were no odds. There is no probability. Right? So, when you're able to see uncertainty, when you're able to see that all control is just an illusion, it fundamentally changes the way you lead life, right? So that's the second gift, the gift of impermanence. Third, this has taken some time learning. This is the gift of rejection. As an entrepreneur, you are constantly facing rejection. You're being rejected by investors, you're being rejected by customers, you're being rejected by the market, what have you. And because there is so much shame associated with being rejected, your default response is to try and go and become better. But sometimes, if you step back and you see, why is it that rejection or failure causes shame? And if you sit with it, if you meditate on it, if you still with it, it can shift something for you internally and forever. That's what happened with me. When I could see that I did not need to do anything or be anything to be worthy, I could gently confront shame. I could look at shame in the eye. And I could say that, I'm going to pursue excellence, not perfectionism, excellence, and I can fail, and then there is no shame in it. Right? In the culture that we are raised in, even if you and I don't know one another, it is very, very likely that all of us have an internalized sense of shame. Right, and shame can fundamentally stop you from doing stuff. So, for instance, if you want to sing, and if you don't, if there's a voice inside you says, I really want to sing, and you are not able to sing, if you're not able to come up here and sing, in all likelihood, what is stopping you? It is
shame.
It is shame. It's the fear of shame. It is fundamentally the number one obstacle. To the point, it is in the air that we breathe and the water that we drink, and we're not even able to see it. It is so normalized. But when you are facing rejection publicly, as an entrepreneur, you're facing rejection publicly. It can, and when you're able to see, okay, so why? What is so shameful about failing? When you sit down with that question, without reacting and saying, I'm going to do something better, or I'm going to do something bigger. If you can fundamentally still with that question, that can change everything, right? And judgment, that word which is most pregnant with meaning, right? And you find that all judgment is self-judgment, right? Because I say all judgment is self-judgment because if I'm not willing to see my own humanity, I am going to be unwilling to see the humanity in you. Is that right? If I'm unwilling to allow myself to make mistakes, it is highly unlikely that I will cut you any slack if you make any mistakes. So the gift of rejection translated into life skills gave me an understanding of shame, judgment, and failure. The fourth of these gifts, the penultimate, is the gift of discomfort, right? How many of us are told from time to time, especially so many young people here, how many of us are told from time to time that you should not get angry, that anger is not good for you? How many of us are told from time to time, as kids and as adults? And then, when you grow up as adults, what happens? You are feeling angry, and then you are feeling angry at the fact that you're feeling angry. Is that right? Does that make sense? Yeah? And what it does is it does not just simply inhibit your capacity to feel anger, it inhibits your capacity to feel any emotion. Right? And yet, as an entrepreneur, having difficult conversations, being uncomfortable, is an everyday job. So, what it has done for me outside of business is it has helped me be vulnerable. Be able to say what I want to say, be able to express my discomfort with the greatest amount of love that I can summon in that moment. Here, and the same thing holds true for others. Other people are able to say exactly what they want to say to me, so long as they're able to summon the greatest amount of love that they are present to, including the lack of love that might be the case. Right? So the gift of discomfort, to be able to seek consent, in some of the workshops that we do, sometimes I find myself saying that there's only one thing which is better than asking a question, and that is asking a question whether you can ask a question. And asking you, sir, ma'am, buddy, can I ask you a question? You see how that makes a difference when I say that, can I ask you a question? It makes a difference, right? So consent, difficult conversations, vulnerability. And finally, this is my favorite, entrepreneurship has made me present to the gift of absurdity, right? And I'll be brief about this. Do you know what the odds of a sperm and an egg becoming into human form are? Do you know what are the odds? A woman in her life has about 1 lakh eggs, right? A man in the course of his life has about 3 trillion sperms. You know what are the odds of each of us making into this planet? You know what are the odds? Anyone? 1 in 4 billion. You know, which means that nothing you do in life is ever going to need you to better those odds. Not building a vaccine for cancer, not building a colony on Mars. The fact that you are here already means you won the lottery. I repeat, the fact that you are here already means you have. Thank you very much.